Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name's Nader. I have Martin again here with us. We're going to go through some React questions this time. So Martin had something come up for one of his assignments. We're not going to solve his homework for him, but he's going to walk us through kind of a bit of a React because he's in part 2 of the Bootcamp series. And we're going to keep following along his journey. And some of these videos are just going to be kind of us going through some of the assignments and other kinds of homework that he gets throughout the bootcamp, so we can kind of see a more authentic view of what that actual code might look like and kind of projects and day-to-day expectations might actually look like. So he came to me with a bunch of questions, and I thought, why not do the recording and have other people learn from our awesome, wonderful mistakes, because there's no such thing as silly mistakes. So let's just take a look at it. So Martin, maybe you want to give a quick shout out and maybe just a run through of kind of what you wanted to go through.
Sure, yeah. Hey guys, Martin here. So yeah, we're in phase 2 right now. I'm having some trouble with React. I just started picking it up maybe about like 2 weeks ago about. And I've just been, kind of drilling some stuff as much as I could, watching like the lectures and everything. So I had some trouble come up in, a little homework assignment that they gave me. So, I reached out to Natter, and then, here we are.
Let's do it. So also for everyone, also for you, Martin, I think like this is the same approach I would take when kind of working with the developers on my team. I'll be probably a little bit more instructive than normal, but not too much more so. So you can probably see, hopefully you have a kind senior developer or a developer manager on your team who can help likewise. But this is probably something that you could expect when talking to a senior dev like in the workplace on your team, depending on the support structure that you have in place. So our focus is really going to be on eventually over time. Hopefully, we can see Martin improve the technical communication, because even just talking about this code, especially when you're not entirely sure what you're even asking, is really kind of quite hard. So we're going to work on that skill and hopefully not embarrass ourselves too much, but that's also part of the fun. So go for it. Feel free to share your screen, Martin, and let's take a look.
Okay. So here. All right. So what we got? Let me turn off the fan really quickly.
No worries. So I guess for those watching while Martin does that, like he gave me a quick run through of this before, but I realized this is so awesome to actually have this recorded that I might just do a quick repeat. We only talked for a couple of minutes before we realized how important it is to record. So hopefully that's okay, Martin, for us to kind of go through this again. So maybe just give us a quick walkthrough of the UI that you had, if you can maybe pull up the front end application itself, and then you can walk us through kind of what you wanted to solve together.
Sure. Yeah, so this is basically a kind of Flatiron stock exchange homework. So basically what they want to happen is you have a set of stocks here from different companies. You got Google, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my portfolio, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically what's supposed to happen is quite a few deliverables. I already made the first one happen, which was basically, make the companies themselves appear
Mm-hmm.
on the stocks side.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the second deliverable is going to be when I click on these stocks, I quote unquote buy them, and
Mm-hmm.
then they disappear from these stocks, and then they get transferred to my portfolio.
Okay.
And that's just a second one. There's another one here where obviously you filter it by
Sure.
the type, and then like alphabetical and by price as well.
Good. One step at a time. We'll get it. But I guess here's a question before you jump back to the code. You mentioned this, that I thought it was so important. Like, how did it feel? Like you pulled this down as a repo. So this you didn't code any of this, right? This is kind of a template set up by the school, and your goal is to solve these different tasks, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I'll get there, but as of now, no, I did
Okay.
not code this.
You will get there. I
Yeah,
believe it. Honestly, you'll do way more than this. You'll do way better than this. I guarantee you, 100%. I know that. But you have to start somewhere. And glorify to-do lists like this are where most people would start. But I think you mentioned that you kind of watched the video, you watched the recording, and you felt confident. You came in here, you cloned this down, and you looked at the code, and then what happened?
and then I completely drowned. That's how it always goes. It's so crazy how like I will watch something and it'll make sense. I've been,
Hmm.
because like I said before we started, I was having kind of like a lazy week, and
Yeah.
I was kind of like, okay, like, I won't be at my computer as much, but I'm just gonna watch the recordings, like the recordings of the live lectures are like an hour long, an hour and a half, and I'm just gonna watch those like all the time. And I was watching them, made sense, everything's good, and then I'm like, okay, now it's time to do some assignments, and I'm drowning, and I need you, Natter.
I'm here. I'm here. We're doing this together. Everyone's gonna learn from us doing this together, and it'll be a lot of fun. So feel free to feel back to the code. I'm gonna start grilling you super hard. Um, so I guess like, do you mind opening up the app.js that you have over there? Um, walk me through this. Like what is this application? How is it kind of built at a very, very high level? And what are these kind of component things that are going on here?
Yeah, so basically, we have a function here, and this is, I guess, all of these are, quote unquote components, right?
Hmm.
Which are basically functions, but they can take props, and they return JSX.
Okay.
So basically, what I'm doing here is I'm returning the components, which are here on the side,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah.
it's basically giving you it, it basically returns, I guess my own words, is like the title of the book, right? Like
Okay.
the book called Header. Well,
Right.
what's in Header? In
Right.
order to find that out, you have to go to the
I like
header
that.
component itself.
I like that a lot. Nice. Good. So which components do you feel right now are you kind of stuck on, and where is kind of the trouble happening for kind of what we're debugging together right now?
Yeah, so in this case, which is kind of the for me at least, the biggest problem with React is, to me, React feels like a huge, like, jumbled mess of wires, right? And you have to keep track of the wires. Like, okay, header goes in here. Okay, but when you go into header, header is going to have, some other,
Hmm.
component in it, and then you
Hmm.
have to go into that one, and so on.
Hmm.
So basically, we have to go back to what we need to do, right?
Right.
So let me bring up what we have to do again. So here is basically the stocks, and my portfolio is basically what I'm trying to
Right.
change, right?
Right.
Trying to work on.
Yeah.
So we have to find out, okay, cool. So if we know that, which components handle those things,
Correct.
right? So in my case, it would be main container. Now
Okay.
you'd probably say, oh, well, why isn't it stocks or
Hmm.
stock container?
Right.
Well, it's
Exactly.
because, yeah, well, it's because these two components right here, stock and stock container, have information that they both need from each other. And correct me if I'm wrong, Natter, but
Sure.
they have information that they need from each other. So in order for them to both have that information, they will be both put in a parent
Mm.
component, which is main container.
No, that's a great way to
Yeah.
think about it. Yeah, there's other ways to do that, but that's absolutely one reason why you do that. It's a really good explanation. How did you find that out though? How did you know that? Like looking at this code, how did you what you just said, that stock, what was it? Stock container, I think you said it was, and then
Mhm.
stock. Like how did you know that those were like quote unquote inside this main container?
Yeah, so actually, let me see here. Okay, so basically, it's also not just stock container, it's also portfolio container,
Right.
because if you look at this component here, what it's returning is,
Hmm.
in my example, is two more books,
Okay.
right? Two more wires that you have to keep into account, which
Okay.
is portfolio container and stock container.
Right.
But if you
Right.
go into stock container, you realize that stock container has stock
I see. I see.
imported from the stock component.
Very
So
good. Very good. All right. So let's zoom out a little bit because it's getting kind of hairy pretty quickly.
yeah.
So let's go back to our main container. So what I want you to do in the main container here. So this is kind of somehow showing that like list or two lists beside each other. And we're kind of on a quest to probably figure that out. So in your own words, like I think this is really challenging task, but I would like you to walk us through in as much detail as you can what this is and what is happening and what all these functions are and how it all works and what it's returning.
Okay. All right, I can do this. All right,
You
so
can do this, yeah, and I'll help you.
yeah, basically, in this component here, I'm using two what React has uh you know tools that React has.
Mm-hmm.
There's many of them, but these are two of them, which are basically hooks. I'm using use effect and use state, so we have
Okay.
to import that from React itself in order to use them.
Okay.
And the first one, use state, I'm using it here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I use it twice, but here's one example.
Okay.
And basically, use state returns an array of two values, I guess you could say, two
Yeah.
arguments.
Okay.
And one is going to be the state, which is basically what we want to play with.
Okay.
Like hypothetically, this could be a counter, like it's counting up
Sure.
and down.
Sure.
And then this here is what React calls a setter function, which
Okay.
is basically going to be the function that updates slash changes the portfolio, or the first argument.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is kind of, I guess, basically, yeah, basically like a callback
Okay.
function where we would, sort of like define somewhere else, I guess.
Okay.
um and then yeah, so that's the use state, the first one. And then basically, let me see here. Oh yeah, and then use state, it does take one value here, and it's basically going to take in your chosen default value
Mm-hmm.
for the first argument, which is state. And in our
Okay.
case, it's typically, from what I've seen, it's typically going to always be, I mean, I shouldn't say always, but I mean, from what I've seen, it's a lot of the times it's used as an empty string.
Mm-hmm.
But I found out in this case it's going to be an empty array.
Mm-hmm.
So I have it set to an empty array
Mm-hmm.
as the default value, but this can be anything you need it to be.
Okay.
um
Okay. That's acceptable. I like that. I like that. That's good. Really good. We can go deeper into that, but that's actually a really good explanation. I like that. So there's some destructuring magic going on here. Like you said, the first value is the state, the second value is the function to change that state. You're just pulling it out into those variables so that you can use them. You don't have to do like array at one or array at zero kind of thing. So what happens after that then? Like after you create those states?
yeah, so basically what we want to do now is with these is this is basically your way of changing something that needs to be changed.
Mm-hmm.
So in our case, we would want to do that with a fetch request.
Okay.
Because the first thing that I wanted to do here was make the companies appear on the
Mm-hmm.
page.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to do that, I needed to fetch that data from this API, right?
I see.
That's a
Yes.
API, right? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
want to be sure. And then it obviously returns a promise
Okay.
to which you want to turn into a JSON object.
Okay.
And then from there, this is the third, I guess, statement within the fetch. The second then
Mm-hmm.
is basically doing what you want to do with the data.
Right.
Typically in JavaScript, you would basically want to take that data and then pass on a callback function,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
hypothetically. Like if hypothetically the data was an image URL, right, that you wanted to display, then the callback here would be something, maybe display image, right? And then you
Okay.
would put display image and then pass in data, and then define the callback somewhere else that would display the image on the actual DOM, or
Yeah.
that would append it to the actual DOM, I
I
guess.
like that.
But in this case, we want to make that data change the state that we have up here, the
Mm.
portfolio. Actually, I'm sorry. This is actually what do you call it? This was the top one here that I have highlighted
Yeah.
was actually the state that I'm trying to do for the second deliverable.
Okay.
This state right here is for this use effect here.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so my bad on that. And then
No, it's all
basically the
good.
data, yeah,
So
the data that I
I'll
got.
challenge you really quick here. So you're finishing this off, but I think this is kind of a similar answer. In like very plain English, without getting all like crazy reacty on everyone. how would you explain kind of this use effect thing that's happening? Like what would you say as simply as possible to explain this kind of line 12 to line 16 that you have here?
Oh man, I swear to God, I knew this. Um, used effect. Um, oh, man, I have it in my notes. I should know this. I should
It's
know
okay.
this.
It's okay. The more you practice this stuff, the better you get. And I'm gonna hammer it into your brain if you don't get it. So, um, yeah, take a sec to think about it. If you don't know, you can call a friend Nat over here.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd have to pass it to you because as far as it's definitely in my notes, but as far as I know, use effect is you do have to use it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you do have to use it when you use fetch. You have to
Mm.
use it for that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's. I guess I'll try to zoom out. I'll say what use if I in this case. Let's take this particular example. So I guess in English, what I would say is this use effect has a second argument here, which is that empty array, which is on line 16,
Mhm.
correct? So that's saying that effectively when this component mounts, which means when it first gets rendered in the DOM, then run this code. Right. And what code do we want to run? Well, we want to run this fetch request. So we're going to go fetch. And before we do this, there's nothing in the DOM, really, because this data is not being populated. And for example, when we're looking at line 23, stocks is null or undefined. Right, at this point, when we first load this JavaScript, stocks is actually undefined, or it'll be an empty array. Right. There'll be nothing in there. It'll just be that empty array that you set on line 10. Right. But then when everything gets loaded up, a fetch request is going to get sent. And we're going to go fetch from this API, your stocks API, which is running locally. We're going to grab the JSON, and then we're going to say, hey, React, I want you to set the state for stocks to be this JSON instead, right? Which is probably an array of a bunch of objects, is what I'm guessing. And then what's going to happen is React is going to be like, oh, that's cool. I'll do that for you. Now stocks is some new value. But I'm going to do you a favor, and I noticed that you're actually using stocks on line 23, and that's part of what you need to actually render things inside the DOM. So I assume that you're going to want me to kind of like re-render that because now there's some new stuff in there, and stocks has some new state. So since you updated that state, I assume that you're interested in that state being updated. Hence, I'm going to re-render the UI that uses that state, which is what's happening on line 23. Right. So that's like literally step by step, kind of exactly what's happening from start to finish. So in kind of one sentence, the use effect in this case is going out to the API to get some data to change the state, which changes the UI. Okay? So I guess with that in mind, let's think about this. If we were to if you were to comment out line 13 to line 15,
Mhm.
right? And let's try that for now. I'll get you to do that. But before you flip back to the browser, I want you to tell me what we'll see.
If we comment this out. Oh well,
If we,
actually,
yeah,
let me change that just because I had it on the
we
side.
had on the side. You're
Yeah, I
gonna
had it on
cheat.
the
Yeah.
side. Yeah, so I switched it. Um, so
Based on what we just talked about, what do we expect to see now
yeah, so
in our DOM?
if I had to guess, uh, we would see the page
Hmm.
the page normally. Nothing should be changed except for the companies. The companies should all be gone.
Okay, so we'll still see kind of the title and then the portfolio and all that kind of stuff, but then that list of prices and company names will be gone.
Yes, that's what I think. Yeah.
Okay, let's check.
Okay.
Moment of truth.
Let's.
Yes,
Here we go.
very nice, very good.
Yeah.
So why? What made you say that?
Well, basically because we're not fetching the. Oh, actually, I have it here. I have it here. We're not. This is the information that we want.
Right.
And since we're not fetching it, we're not telling React to grab it and then
Hmm.
update the setter function, which will then
Yep.
update the state.
Yep.
We basically cut off the lifeline of everything we once saw.
Correct. So
right?
what is in the state for stocks right now?
In the state for that's going to be the empty array that I
Yes,
set it
correct.
to.
Very
Yeah.
good. Excellent. Good. Good answers. Perfect. That's correct. So yeah, you can comment that back in. So let's figure this out. So um, walk us through kind of and I guess the JSX for everyone. Hopefully, we won't go too deep into that since I know Martin, that you kind of explained a little bit of how that works. So we have these different components and they each have their own HTML in them and they're going to be rendering depending on kind of what's in there, right? So now that we've kind of gone through the basics of this component, at least, what's next for us? Like, where does your brain go for trying to figure out how do we get these things to shift over?
Um. I guess I don't understand. What do you mean by shift over?
Like, so we want to move everything from the stock container into the portfolio container, right? As you click on them. So if we click on Google,
Oh,
you want to move that over into portfolio. Is that part of the assignment that you mentioned?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So what comes to mind for like what's the first thing that probably you'd want to look at or try to figure out to figure out how that might work? Which direction would you go in?
So I guess the basic step that I would take is kind of like speaking out loud and
Mm-hmm.
kind of simplifying what it is I want to do.
Absolutely, do it. Go
And
for it.
yeah, and basically kind of maybe simplify it. So in the most simple terms, when I click on these any of these rectangles,
Yes.
I want them to disappear
Okay.
and go here and
Okay.
appear here instead.
Correct. Yes.
So if that's true, then the first step, which is what I said, is I want to click. I want to. So I know I need some kind of like event listener, some kind of
Correct.
on click function.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
On click function on what?
Yeah, that's the I would have assumed that it would have been in I would assumed it would have been here in the stock container.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where would you put it on the stock container?
Yeah. So my line of thinking was um in the stock container here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm basically mapping over the data,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm mapping over the data, and then for every stock in stocks,
Mm-hmm.
I want to create a stock component, and
Okay.
then I did, pass all of these in. So what I was thinking was, okay, so if that's the case, if I'm creating every rectangle,
Mm-hmm.
I would also want to add that on click functionality while I'm doing that. That was my line of thinking.
Right. No, that makes sense. Um, and I guess so in English, you're saying that each stock rectangle is going to have an event listener on it, probably for click, that's going to notice that it gets clicked. And in that click callback or function event listener handler, we need to figure out the logic to tell React that, hey, that particular stock, right, may be identified by some unique identifier like the ID or something, has moved from the stock container. And now we want to put it into the portfolio container, right? You want to remove it from the stock container and then put it into the portfolio container. So another way of saying that, I guess, is we want to remove it from the array of stocks and put it into the array of portfolio stocks,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So if we go back to main container, what we're saying is that we have these two states. We have stocks, set stocks, which is what's being rendered on line 23, which is what you were showing us earlier, which has all that list of stocks right now. And then we have line 8, which we're not actually using right now. And in theory, that's going to be very similar logic where it's going to show a list of stocks, but on the right hand side of the screen, right?
Yeah.
Using a different array potentially. It could be Yeah, probably different array because we have an array that's going to be a bunch of stocks for the stock side and an array that's going to be a bunch of stocks for the portfolio side. And we don't have duplicates across both. So we can move from one to the other and back again. So I guess another question is, before we get into this, is the reverse true, where if you put it into portfolio, you can click it and put it back into stocks?
It shouldn't be. No.
So once you choose it as a portfolio stock, it's stuck as a portfolio stock.
Oh, well, you know what? That actually might be the case. I can check just to be sure. Um Here, I have it right here. And it does have like a video here. So yeah, it's you click it. Oh, and it doesn't even remove it actually. Yeah, oh yeah, you can sell it. You can sell it. Yeah, that's yep. So when you click it, it gets added to the my portfolio.
Okay.
And then you can click it again so you can quote unquote sell your
Okay.
stock.
But it doesn't remove it from the left-hand side. It just
It
gets
does not,
added to the
no.
right.
My
Okay.
bad.
That's okay. That's good. That's important questions to ask. So we can only add and remove from the right hand side. We can't actually remove anything from the left hand side or add anything to the left hand side, right?
Hmm.
So does stocks ever change? I guess is the question. Is it ever gonna once we fetch stocks, is it gonna change?
No, I mean there is like the filter functionality that is implemented that's going to change the like you can filter it by price, and then you can filter it by
Oh, I see. I see.
yeah, by
Okay.
the type. It
Okay.
might be
But there won't be
tech.
like magically like a bunch more that we need to go fetch. Once we fetch it, we're done, right? We don't have to
Oh,
go fetch.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. Um, that makes sense. So there's a few probably more questions we can go to, but for the sake of not melting your brain, let's take a look at how we can actually solve this. So I hinted at it a little bit earlier, but you kind of have part of the solution listed here already. So I kind of want to emphasize that, and I'm gonna kind of push you to see if you can see the mental leap you need to take to actually get to the solution. Because actually, I think once you take that mental leap, hopefully it becomes much more clear. So you have two states here, correct?
Hmm.
So what are these states? The one on top, portfolio stocks, is the list of stocks that is to be rendered on the right-hand side of the screen. And then stocks by itself, the one on line 10, is the list of stocks that's going to be rendered on the left-hand side of the screen, correct?
Yeah.
And we can remove from stocks, or technically not remove.
Yeah.
We can take from stocks or copy from stocks and add it to portfolio stocks.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess let's start super basic. I think you said this earlier, and I think it's a super important kind of way to think about this because you can easily start being like, oh, do I do push? Do I do pop? Do I do filter? Do I do map? Do I do reduce? Like, how do I do all this kind of stuff? You know what? Let's just log stuff to the console and make sure it works, right? So um, let's do this. When you click on a stock, let's see if we can log high,
Yeah.
right? That should be our first goal. How would you go about doing that?
Okay. So because doing the on click and then setting the functionality to log high, I do know how to do. The
Okay.
problem that I was having was how to give those companies that click on click effect,
Mhm.
um which I had thought was here, but I assume it's probably not.
It is there. Yes.
It
That
is.
would be correct. Yeah. Yeah. So
What?
there's a few places you can do this, right? So I mean, actually, I guess let me rephrase that. So this is rendering a stock, right?
Yeah.
And what is a stock? Like in the context of this application, what is stock? Like where is that coming from?
uh the API.
Where
Right.
is like I guess on line two, right? What is happening there?
we're importing stocks from the component
Component.
stock.js.
Right. So let's take a look at that. What is stock.js? It's simply a single stock card, right?
Uh-huh.
So if we open that up, what does it actually look like? What's the actual HTML that's being returned? So it's a div with another div. Look at that. I love the nested divs. Look at that. We got three nested divs in here. I love it. Card body, card title, card text. Okay. So um there there's a whole bunch of places that we can do event
Oh,
listeners, but let's start super, super basic.
yeah.
How would you make it so that when I click this stock right here that you have on the screen, it logs high?
Okay. Yeah, I think I just noticed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Damn it.
No, it's okay. This is part of what
Yeah.
we're doing here.
Yeah. So I would assume since it would probably be here, huh? Right? Or am I did I just
Wherever you
botch
want.
that?
Yeah, go try it. Go for it.
Yeah. So unclick and then I've done this a few times. So yeah, I think it's gonna be like this, and then you do press this,
Hmm.
and then oh wait, why didn't I do it? Okay, console dot. Why is it doing that? Dot log.
Gotta love the autocomplete. All right,
Okay.
good. So, do you think this is gonna work?
On click. Got the brackets. You're doing the callback there, and then you're giving it the this should work.
Is it gonna work for all the stocks or just one?
It should work for all of them because this is basically like the blueprint of how
Hmm.
every stock is going to be,
Good,
right?
good. Let's try it out. Let's see if you're right.
God. Okay.
I think
Uh
you might need to move your. There you go. Perfect. Got it.
okay.
All right. Moment of
So
truth.
yeah.
There's a console. Let's look for that high.
Let's go.
Oh, nice. Try the other titles. There you go. Look at that. Isn't that wonderful? How's that feel?
Oh my god. Let's go.
Nice. Look at that confidence boost already. He went from like 0 to like at least 25% right there. I love it. All right. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense. Yeah.
Okay. So let's just slightly more complicated. How do you log out the name of the one that you clicked?
The name of the oh sure. Um yeah. So I assume I'd have to pass in the callback that I'm creating. I have to pass in props, and then I console log uh props.name.
Yeah, so you're pretty close. So you gotta be careful with this, I guess, because you see how on line 3, the argument being passed into your stock function is actually called props.
Uh-huh.
So now we have two things called props, and it's line 8 is actually using a different props than all your other lines because you also renamed props on line 8. So do you see that? So there's two props now. There's like the props for the on click and there's the props for the stock.
The
I
props
think
for
I
the
can.
the props for the stock you're referring to this one.
Yes, correct. So
Okay.
normally what gets passed into the on click is the event. Most people would label it as E. You can also just say
Ah.
event, whatever is easiest. That has stuff in it that you can actually use. And this actually
Mhm.
comes from the DOM API. It's slightly different in React. It's they have something called synthetic events, but it's very similar. But we don't actually need it in this case. So here's my question. If you just have this, just this, you don't even put the event in there. Is it going to work?
I would prefer to destructure props, but I think it would.
Where would you destructure it?
I would destructure it right here.
Yeah, go for it. Try it out.
To destructure, just if this works.
Destructure it.
Okay. So okay. So yeah, so the way we would do that is basically we would do const and then we would do the array. And basically we would take the properties of props Because basically what destructuring is you're putting the value of the properties to a variable, but the variable is also named the
Right.
actual prop. So I know that props has name, price, but let's just keep it simple. I guess you can do name,
Mhm.
right? And then we'll do that equal to props, right? And then this should work.
Right.
I think.
Look at that confidence, everyone. I love it. That's great. This is
Okay.
developers everywhere.
Oh God.
Uh-oh. It broke.
Damn it.
So
Mm.
let's look at this error. So we're getting an error, and this is a tricky one actually if you don't know exactly what's going on. But it's saying that kind of probably what you just wrote is breaking it, right? We can probably deduce that. But it's saying props is not iterable on line 4, right? At the
Uh-huh.
very, very top. It's saying props is not
Yeah.
iterable, stock.js line 4. So what that means is that actually very small, um, I guess, error. If you go back to your code,
Yeah.
you used one of the two types of destructuring, and out of the two, you use the wrong one on line 4. So take a look at line 4. How are you destructuring name out of props? So what's the type of props? Is it what do you think the type is?
Yeah. The type of props is going to be an object.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And is square brackets on line 4?
That's an array.
Correct. So how do you destructure an object instead of an array?
How do I destructure an object? Oh, is it going to be no, would it? It wouldn't be props.name, would it? No, that's wrong.
Even simpler than that. Like, yeah.
Even simpler.
I was hinting at the brackets. Like, what does square brackets mean?
Square brackets. The square brackets. Okay, I see square brackets, and I think array or bracket notation. Or sorry,
Okay,
yeah, bracket notation.
good,
Yeah.
good, good. And you just said earlier that props is an object, it's not an array.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
Okay, okay, cool.
that makes sense. Because I was treating it like an array when props is not an array; it's an
Correct.
object.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this should work now.
See?
Yeah, there we go. Oh wait, so what were we checking
You wanted,
again?
I think, the click. You were console
Oh
logging in
yeah.
on click. All right,
So
there you
yeah,
go.
there we go.
Very nice.
Google, Twitter, Amazon,
Well
use
done.
it.
Well done. Excellent. Good job. So a lot of people, what they'll do is if you watch your component, what a lot of people will do is they will actually take kind of what you did on your first line in that function, um, and they'll actually just put it directly into the argument list for or the parameter list for the actual function. So if you go back to your code, I'll show you what I mean. You see how you kind of yeah. So you can basically replace props on line 3 with literally like that curly brackets name, and that's the exact same thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. I did see that one. I think I prefer
Whichever you
this. I'm not
prefer.
gonna
Yeah,
lie.
I'm just saying a lot of
Yeah.
people do both. So if you see both, don't be confused. Like that's literally the same thing. But be aware that destructuring an array is different from destructuring an object, and you have to
Yeah.
match the types. Otherwise, you get that issue. So sorry. Go ahead and put the props back into the function argument there. And I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So we have now, to recap, the ability to log each name that's coming through um, onto each of these stocks. And what do we want to do? Well, we want to make it so that when you take that, we take that name and we add it to a new stock on the right hand side, which means actually adding that stock as a new array item or a new object, including its name, price, and I think ID, right, onto
Yeah.
the array on the right hand side. So we need a way to basically keep track of the things that are being clicked here, um, and move them over to the array that's being rendered for the portfolio side. So this is where it actually gets a little bit trickier. And I think this is kind of the
Yeah.
problem that you were hinting at earlier. But let's see how you deal with this. So how do you kind of approach the next step here now that we have the name being printed out?
So okay. So what I was thinking and what I would do is I guess what I would do is instead of console logging, I would definitely replace the console.log with a callback,
Okay.
right? With a callback. And I guess I could call this maybe display portfolio,
Great.
maybe port stocks. And then in display port stocks, I assume I would probably need to do a fetch, but it would be a patch instead.
So
It
what
would
makes
be
you
a
say that?
well, just because I had thought that since we're oh well no, because that was in the original thought where one was being actually taken from it. Like if I would have clicked on Google, it would have gone away and then put somewhere else. That's what I was thinking with an
Okay.
update.
I guess here's another
That's
question on the same kind of vein is like, if we reload the page, do we need to save our portfolio, or does it just refresh to an empty portfolio? Or is that too far down the line?
oh like if it refreshes, does everything go back to the way it
Yeah.
was? Um I guess it really doesn't matter. To tell you the truth.
Okay. Okay. So let's
Yeah.
go with no to keep it simple.
Okay.
And then we can add that feature later if it's required, but it does add a bit of complexity. So let's assume no saving. Once you refresh the page, you just start from scratch again and you have nothing in your portfolio. So um, display port stocks. Um, I guess here's the question. Let's see if you can kind of see where I'm going with this line of reasoning. What does the portfolio stocks component need in order to display stocks?
What does the portfolio stocks need in order to display stocks?
Mm-hmm.
So in order to display it, in order to dis okay, in order to display it, I guess I'm trying to like basic like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like kind of the even if it like sounds a little too simple,
No, go for it.
I want to say it. So if I wanted to display it, I would what I would think is going to the app.js and making sure that that is there.
Sure. Okay. So what when you say that is there, what do you mean by that?
Oh, you know what? No, because that's a yeah, I'm referring here. This is an actual function, and
Mm-hmm.
what's put in app.js are components.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I would probably want to implement a function that will obviously do what I want it to do, but figure out would which component that would be to put that function in,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes
Oh,
sense.
what did I do?
That makes sense. So I guess we kind of saw that header is kind of boring. It just has like the header stuff in there. So probably all the action is happening in main container. So if we open that up,
Mm.
um, here, the kind of important parts are really line like 23 and 26, right? There's a lot of stuff happening on those lines. We're rendering the list of stocks on the left, and we're rendering the list of portfolios that we chose on the right. And the one on the left, as we saw earlier, is using the state, which is on line 10, which is the array of objects, each of which is a stock, which we did get from our fetch request and our use effect, right? So when the page loads up, we pass that in as a prop, and then that container is responsible for kind of doing some magic, which means mapping through it and giving us a stock for each one of those, correct?
Yeah.
So what does portfolio container need in order to do something similar?
Um. Well, wouldn't it? well, wouldn't it use this
Yeah, yeah, it
state?
would.
Yeah. So stocks. Oh, yeah. So just like stock container, I do need to pass
Mhm.
portfolio stocks to
Great.
portfolio container.
Yeah, it makes sense. That checks out.
Oh wait, yeah, and then equals, and then yeah, and then I would set this to portfolio stocks again, right?
Because you named it that, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we open that up, what does that look like? The portfolio container.
Um. Oh. Let me see what it. Let me put it up here. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll give you a little trick so that we don't have to think about this too hard for now. Let's do a really hacky way to show that this is working without getting too deep into actually rendering components. And I'll show you how this might be really useful for you to actually do this in the future. But right now, what's missing on line 4?
Line four. I assume it'd probably be props,
Yeah,
right? The
let's do it.
props to pass down. Yeah.
Okay. And what I just want you to write some code in here. And so for everyone watching, this is a technique I actually use all the time. Like literally this exact line, you can use it for pretty much everything to debug stuff. If you're too lazy to actually render components out just to make sure things are actually working. So what you can write inside of those curly brackets is we want to see if we can actually display those stocks, but without actually having to write a bunch of HTML, right? Like, so what's the easiest way to do that? Well, we can just display it as a string. So in the browser, the way that we can do that is we can stringify using JSON that object or that array of object, and it actually shows it inside of that as a span or a paragraph, or I think even a text node. So what I mean is under that comment, I want you to try this really quick. And this is the hack that you can probably write down in your notes, really useful one. You've probably seen this one before. We can do JSON.stringify
Mm-hmm.
and we can pass in the props. And this actually takes three arguments. The stringify function takes three arguments. Props can be the first one. We can pass it another argument as well. So you can do comma, and I just put null in for this one. And for now, we can ignore that. And I just put 2 in for the spacing here, and you'll see what I mean shortly. The
Did you
number
put
two,
what?
the number 2.
Oh, okay.
And this is just for spacing. So literally this line you can use for everything. The only thing that changes is what is in props. So if you want to display something and you're too lazy to generate a bunch of HTML for it, you can just do this and you'll see kind of what I mean in a second once we actually get this to work. So let's assume that this is solved. I know it sounds kind of fantastical, but let's assume that portfolio container is now solved just for a second.
Okay.
Okay. The only problem is that in order for it to be really, really solved and have things change, is our props need to change, right? As we click things on the left, we want to change the state for what? We want to change the state for what's being passed into here so it re-renders this component, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if you go back up a step to the main container, what we're actually trying to change is portfolio stocks, right? That's the state that we need to change. So another way to say that is when we click on a stock inside of stocks, which is what we were looking at before, right? We have an on click in there. We need to change portfolio stocks, right? By putting in a new stock into that array. How do we change portfolio stocks?
The way we change portfolio stocks would be to use the setter function set
Correct.
portfolio stocks. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct. And which component needs to set portfolio stocks?
Which component portfolio container?
Is it?
Uh, so, okay. So, ask that one more time.
So which component do we need to be able to manipulate portfolio stocks from? So that when we click stuff, we can change what's in portfolio stocks.
Oh, that would probably The main container, right?
Yeah, but main container has a couple of things inside. But this is a hard question. That's why I'm really pressing you on it. This is tricky. I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna push you until you get it because I know you'll get it. So if we go back a step, we want it so that when we click a stock,
Yeah.
it goes into portfolio stocks, correct?
Mhm.
Where is that all happening?
It's okay. So the functionality that will that like where that's pinpointed, that functionality
Hmm.
should be in stocks
Yes,
because that's where the entire on click is.
that's correct. Absolutely.
I got it right?
Yes. Yeah, you got it
Oh,
right.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's right. That's really perfect. You did a great job. So I guess the challenge is that right now we don't have a way from this component, from this stock component, we don't have a way to reach out
Yeah.
and change portfolio stocks, right?
Yeah.
So how do we make it so that's possible? How do we give stock the ability to change portfolio stocks?
Yeah. We would have to import and export.
Close, close. How will we do that in the context of React? This is a really hard question,
The
actually. I'm circling around the answer to see if you can eventually get it because this is very challenging. This is kind of the why this question is hard, or this assignment is hard. This part of it.
Okay, so the only things that that I guess I know of is like when you're trying to reach from component to component,
Yeah,
to like have them work together
yeah,
is either through importing,
yeah,
and exporting, or
yeah.
through props.
Correct. Exactly. So let's look at main container. How do we get set portfolio stocks into stock?
How do we get set portfolio? Oh, wait. Set portfolio stocks into okay. I feel like this is gonna be like really really dumb. Please don't judge me.
No.
But I okay. So I assume since props is basically an object,
Hmm.
basically an object. If we pass in props to the main container component,
Okay.
then that means in stocks we would just need to do props dot set portfolio stocks.
I mean, you're really close. Not quite, but really close. Really close. Um, I guess let's do this. So, inside of inside of where are we actually using props for the first time? Inside of stock container and portfolio container, correct? So let's go to stock container, for example. I want you to just log out. Oh, you have stocks destructured here. Let's go to portfolio container. Um, I want you to, right before you return, I want you log console, just console log props, which is what's being passed in. What are we going to see in here? And how would you find out what you're going to see in here before actually before looking in your browser?
Okay, so I assume I'll be honest, you're set the second question I don't know. But the
Okay.
first question is I assume, unless I'm wrong, props is going to be the the uh the the information that I've been fetching. Like the company, like if I do props.name, it'll give me Google,
Let me
props.price.
let me make it even more complicated, but also simple for you, if that makes
Uh-huh.
sense. Let's assume you had no idea about fetching anything. You had no idea about anything about this project. Let's assume this is the first file you look at, and you're dumped into this project for the very, very first time, fresh eyes. You're just like, oh, cool, look, I see a portfolio container. You're doing some weird H2 thing in here, portfolio, some stringifying, who knows what that is. But I want to figure out what props are, right? How would I find out what that is that's being given to portfolio container.
And I'm allowed to go into other components,
You're
or it's
allowed to go into other
just
components. Yeah, which component would you go to
okay,
and
yeah.
why?
Yeah, because I'm so hesitant because I just feel like this is going to be
No,
way off. So I assume because we're importing from stock that the props would be from stock.
it's a valid assumption, but actually that's a really tricky one, right? So we are importing stock into portfolio container, not the other way around. So with the intention of using stock inside of portfolio container,
Ah,
not the flip, which is portfolio container being is used somewhere else. We need to figure out the reverse. So how would we figure out where it's being used?
it's so hard to conceptual, like you know what I mean? Like it's
No, it's
so hard
hard.
to
It's tough.
visualize it. It's so intertwining and
Isn't
everything.
it? It's a tree. I think if we were to draw out
Yeah.
a tree at some point, it probably would really, really help if we drew out the component tree for this. So that would probably be a good next step. In fact, I would highly encourage people actually watching this to actually try to draw out the actual component tree, just literally a bunch of circles and lines with labels in the
Yeah.
circles for the components. But um, for what we have right now, let's see how would you find out where props are coming from for portfolio containers specifically?
So I assume if I had to guess, I would assume that the props from portfolio container have to come from its parent component.
That's absolutely correct. That's very well said. Yes.
Okay.
Good. Yeah.
Okay. And then the for portfolio container, I mean, I don't even think this is like the old because app.js there's no oh yeah, I guess there is. But I guess from portfolio container, the adult would be main container.
That seems reasonable. And there could be many answers. There could be other components that use it too, right? But
Hmm.
let's see if it's being used here. And is portfolio container being used here in main container?
Yeah, yeah.
Where, yeah, right there, right? So if we look in that line, what are the props being passed in?
The portfolio stocks.
Correct. Which is what?
Well, at the moment it's an empty array.
Correct. So when we do console.log of props inside of portfolio container, what are we going to see?
An empty array.
Correct. Let's take a look.
Yeah. Okay. Here. Oh, I don't know what
Right?
happened there.
Portfolio stocks, which is the key, because that was the key of the props, because that's what you named before the equal sign, and it's an array of size 0, right? Empty array. Um, it's giving you an error because I think that function that you had inside your callback wasn't defined
Oh,
inside of
yeah.
your stock. I think it was stock.js, but it's actually working here where you can see on the right side, right? It's an empty array and portfolio stocks is the key name. And the key name is the thing that you put on the left-hand side of the equal sign when you're actually passing it in as a prop to the component inside the parent.
Uh-huh.
Right. So for example, we can see what this looks like. So if you go back to the component really quick, and let's rename portfolio stocks on line 26 on the left hand side of the equal sign. Let's just name that something else, like name it like Martin, for example. What would we expect to see in that log?
Um wow. How did that's completely I have so, okay, so what did we have it before? We had portfolio stocks. So if we name it something else that's not anywhere else, I would assume it would be oh, it would it be okay, this is a wild guess, but is it going to be like hold on 1 second.
I
I
love
have
this
this.
excitement. I love it. Like it's a tip of your tongue, tip of your brain here.
I hope I okay, so I assume it would be hold on. Okay, so portfolio stocks is an empty array.
That's correct.
is an empty array. So it would be, I want to say that it's going to be like kind of like an object that if
Mhm.
we do like it's going to be like an object and it's going to be my name and then within that is going to be the empty array.
Yeah, absolutely. That's correct.
Okay. So if I go,
There you go.
yeah, there we go. Yeah, yeah,
So really what it is the key values, right? Just like an object, key value
yeah,
pairs, whatever you can name it whatever you want, right? You can give any key and any value. Doesn't matter. React doesn't care, right?
yeah.
And the entire set of things is props. So let's go back really quick to your code and let's add one more here. I want you to add another prop to line 26. Um,
Okay.
so I want to say, let's just say another prop. Let's call it monkey. And let's give it a value of the string baboon.
Straight up what?
Baboon. Baboon,
Oh,
the
how do you spell baboon?
nice.
Is that like
There you
that?
go. I think so. I think it's
It's
two. I
two
think I
B's.
don't actually know. No, I think it's one. Oh, that's funny. So now the question is, what are we going to see locked?
Yeah. So it should be the same thing. It's going to be the key of Martin with it's going to be an empty array to that, and
Yeah,
then it's going to be another key of monkey,
yeah,
and but it's not going to be an array or an object or anything. It's just going to be the string baboon,
beautiful. I
right?
love it. Look, it's expert. This guy's React expert now. Look at that.
Let's
Oh,
go. Okay,
oh
so
my.
here, wait,
I
where's
think you gotta reload. I don't think you're pressed
oh
refresh. Yeah.
oh there we
There you
go.
go.
Why is it going twice?
It's just the way that React, I think 18 or whatever it is right now works.
Oh,
It's just the way the re-rendering works. We can probably go into that in detail later, but most importantly, it is exactly what you said it would be. Um, Perfect. Does that make sense? Right.
yeah,
So
yeah, that
that
makes perfect
whole
sense.
object is props, which is why when you destructure it, you're destructuring out those values with the key names.
And then I assume, for the users like convenience, you name this whatever makes the most sense for you, right?
That's correct. Usually, that's why I use the same name as the actual thing, but you don't
Yeah.
have to.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that makes
good.
sense.
So sorry for that tangent, but now hopefully this makes it a bit easier. Now, if you kind of go back to the code, we kind of undo some of that. We go back to what the most reasonable version of that was, which
Uh-huh.
was what we would normally see exactly. Um, so now hopefully you can answer this, right? Like if we go to our portfolio container component, um, we are logging out the props. Well, we only have one prop in this case, which we saw, and that's coming from the parent. And the parent is main container. And we are being passed a prop with the key of portfolio container and a value of an empty array, because that's what
Yep.
it is. Make sense?
Yep.
Good. So we're JSON stringifying that object on line 11, right? And so we're expecting to see basically that object stringified, right? A key of portfolio uh, stocks and an empty array,
Hmm.
right? So let's take a look at what's in your. I think you got to fix in your stock.js. I think we just got to get rid of your thing that's breaking the page right now, just so that we can actually see that.
Oh,
Um,
the
Display port stocks.
yeah, where is
I
that?
think it's stock.js, and then it's in the callback for your
Ha.
one click right there. So just do console log or something for now.
Okay.
Beautiful. There you go. So there you go. So you see that under portfolio, you see that JSON being stringified?
Yep.
That's exactly what we see in our console, right? So you don't have to keep
That's
logging this thing out.
stringify.
It's a nice little hack, so you can actually see that being listed directly in the UI, so you don't have to keep checking to console log everything.
So
Um,
I just want to be sure the the hack that you were talking about. So this is basically your where is it?
my hack is
This
line
here.
11. Yes.
Yeah. So that's basically your way of it's your way of no.
Console logging to the UI.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. So question. I know this is like super
No,
beginner, but
ask it.
what does UI mean? Like
Sure.
what?
Good
Yeah.
question. That's an important question. The UI is a user interface,
Yeah.
which is what the user is seeing and interfacing with, right?
Okay.
So as a user, you don't usually have the console open, right? So you have the UI, the graphical, it's called the GUI, graphical user interface usually. So what what we're talking about as a UI in the context of a web application, which is what we're doing right now, is what's being shown by the DOM in the browser. So that is a UI that's being generated. All the markup from the HTML that React is spitting out, the H2s, the paragraphs, the spans, all that kind of stuff. That is what make up the visual of the UI so that we can actually click and look at things and inspect things just by glancing at it. So this is just a hack so that we can actually display basically the console log into our vision field so that we don't have to keep opening the console for things. So as we change this value, the UI will actually update. We don't have to worry about putting in components, which we'll see shortly. So it'll make more sense once we actually do changes to this object. So you can actually get rid of the console entirely now, and the console log even the console, you can close it off if you like, and now we can kind of work with this. And as you change portfolio stocks, that string will also change,
Mm.
which will be nice. So yeah, let's see how we can do that. If we go back to your code, so what we said is we need a way. So let's assume this is solved. Portfolio container, let's assume it's solved. We need a way to get inside of main container. We had that function, which is the setter function for portfolio stocks, right? Set portfolio stocks. So if you go back to main container, we had that as our use state setter function on line 8. We were asking, how do we get that function into our stock component inside of stock container so that we can actually change portfolio stocks from there, correct?
Sure.
Because, well,
Like,
I want to, I'll go slow. So let's go really slow. Well, we have the left-hand column and we have the right-hand column, right? So if you actually go back to your browser, let's just look at it and see if it makes sense. We're saying that when I click Google, what do I want to happen? I want Google to stay on the left. It's not going to move. It's going to stay there, right? But
mhm.
what do I want to happen on the right?
We wanted to, whichever one I click on, a copy or the same information gets
Correct.
pasted there.
Exactly. So we need a way to tell the portfolio component that, hey, I clicked on Google with a price of that price, and you need to show that, right, for yourself, right? So keep a copy of it and like render it on the UI so that people can see it. In this case, our UI rendering is this JSON string. So the way that we're going to see it with this simple example is when I click on, let's say, Twitter, portfolio stocks here, this string on the right should update to have an object in it inside of that array that says Twitter with a price of $29.41 as the first item in that array. Then if I click on Visa, then it's going to have a new item in there that's going to be a Visa of 150. Right? That's what we want to happen. So how do we go about doing that? Well, we want it so that when we have an on click on the left-hand side, it somehow impacts the state of the right-hand side.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
if the state is what is rendering the right-hand side right now is being rendered by portfolio stocks, which is the state, right? That's how we're seeing that string. It knows that it's an empty string right now because that's props.portfolio stocks, right? So if we change it, in theory, that should be a different string and it should have new values in there. So I guess the question is, how do we make it so that when I click a stock on the left, which is what we have right now, an on click, how does that on click change the state of portfolio stocks? so that when that happens, it will just magically render on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
So I was proposing earlier that we can do that because we already have the tools necessary, right? So if you go to the code for a second, we actually have everything already lined up. We have these states at the top, these two sets of states, portfolio stocks, set portfolio stocks. We have stocks, set stocks. We know that we are trying to change portfolio stocks when you click on stocks. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
How do you change portfolio stocks? Just conceptually, what do we need?
Uh, to change portfolio stocks, you need to implement the change you want to the setter function set portfolio stocks.
Absolutely correct. And where are we right now doing stuff when you click on a stock?
Where are we right now when we click?
Like, where is the clicking action happening? The console logging of the stuff on click happening right now? Code.
Oh, stocks.
Correct. So what we're trying to say is instead of just logging out the name here, right? We need to find a way to notify portfolio stocks that we want to add this stock that we just clicked on right now to that list
Yeah.
using set portfolio stocks. So we need a way to get that special function to change the state
Mm,
here so that we can actually set it from here. Does that make sense?
yeah.
So how do we do that?
I'm scared to say it.
Right.
Okay. So what I think is supposed to happen, what I think the answer is okay. So since we have the on click, we're defining what the functionality is. Since we're doing that, uh, what the setter function basically is it's a function,
Function.
right? Like it's
Absolutely. It's just a
yeah.
function. Yeah.
So if that's the case, then that means if we go to main container and we grab
Yeah.
set portfolio stock, we can replace this with set portfolio stocks
Yeah.
and replace name with stocks. No stock.
Correct.
No
We don't really have stock here, so we probably have to recreate it. But yes, absolutely.
stock.
Yeah. What is stock in this case? We don't have the stock, right? What is a stock? It's a name, price, and an ID, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so we should, I think, have all of that.
Oh, so probably what like props dot name.
Yep.
Yeah. So I would do props dot name props dot price like that.
And I think there's an ID in there too.
Ooh, props dot ID.
Right. And we want to wrap this all into probably an object. Let's think about this for a second.
Like that.
Yes, except we're really close. Set portfolio stocks. What is it starting as? What is portfolio stock starting as?
Portfolio stocks is starting as an empty array.
Correct. And what do we want to change it to be over time?
We want it to be an array of objects.
Correct. What are we setting it to right now, right here?
Here at the at with the curly
Yeah,
brackets, it's an object.
correct. So we're going to be replacing that array with a single object, which is not what we want to do. We want to be adding this object to the array inside of set portfolio stocks or inside of portfolio stocks. So portfolio stocks already has an array. We want to add this object to that array.
Yeah.
Because if we do this, what we're going to be doing is replacing the array with this object.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Because it's going to take whatever we give it and put that as the new state.
Oh, an array, right?
Close, pretty close actually. Um,
It's an empty array right now. empty array right now, and we want to give it an object. And since said portfolio stocks, what we pass into it is going to re-render the page and update the state.
Mm-hmm.
So inside of it, yeah, why wouldn't this work? Props to it.
We also have to put this as an object. So let's do that first to fix it,
Oh,
and you'll see why. So an object inside of an array. Sorry, an object inside of an array.
wait, what?
Because like it's an array of objects, right?
It's an array. It's an array of objects. So if I do that, that means
Correct. Exactly.
that.
But now we need the key names because each of these is a value. So we'll probably have to do name colon props dot name, price colon props dot price,
Oh,
or you can destructure, whichever is easier. But let's do that for now. Yeah.
name like that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Good.
that makes sense.
Yeah. And let's just lowercase those just to make it actually no, leave it for now. That's fine. Not a big deal.
Okay.
Um, so this is still not going to work, and I'll show you why in a second. So we're saying whenever you click one of these, I want you to put into that array that object.
Yeah, so we're basically kind of doing an array in an array in an object.
Well, this is going to completely replace what's currently in there. So
Oh.
it's going to replace the empty array with a new array that has one object in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just going to be an array of one object.
Of one object.
Yes.
Um,
This is really
but
confusing, by the way. Yeah.
but
So
wouldn't that be what we want?
close. And I'll show you why not in a second. The only problem is that we don't have access to set portfolio stocks here right now, the way that we have it coded.
Uh-huh.
How do we get it?
What? Sorry, we don't have access to set portfolio stocks.
Correct.
That we would need to import, right?
Yeah, import, or you had option 2 before. How do you get stuff into another component in React?
Props.
Correct. Let's go with that one, and I'll show you why we need to do that, or why we should do that instead of importing. So how do we get as a prop in here into stock? So what I want to do is on line 9, I want to be able to do props dot set portfolio stocks.
Wait a minute. But didn't wait set portfolio? Yeah. Well, wait a minute. Didn't I suggest that earlier? Or no? Was I wrong? I thought that was wrong.
Is it wrong? I don't think it's wrong. It's right.
Okay.
It's one way to do it. It's probably the easiest way to do it, quote unquote easiest.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking that yeah, since it's an props is an object, in order to get like, like if we wanted to set stocks and it'd be, oh wait, but wouldn't we need to also do this as well?
Close, close. You're thinking correctly. It's just the reverse. So this is the parent. We want to pass it to the child because stocks is a child of our child. Stocks is
Oh,
our
yeah.
grandchild in this case. So how do we
So
get it to our grandchild?
stock container.
Yes. So first we pass it to stock container, and then stock container can pass it to stock.
So like comma props.
Close, close.
Oh, but then with this, with the curly.
Really close. Very
Dang.
close, very close. We can give it a name. So let's go back to main container for a sec. So how do we give stock container, right? Because we're trying to get it in there. How do we give stock container set portfolio stocks?
Oh, uh, props dot set
Yeah,
portfolio stocks.
yeah, exactly. But before we can even do that, we have to give it here, right? Remember how we gave monkey in before as baboon, and how we gave Martin in as we on line 23.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Like
So then if
you
that
can,
would be the case, stocks is
you remember
sorry.
you can name it whatever you like, but we want our
Yeah.
goal is to pass in set portfolio stocks into stock container as a prop.
Yeah. Yeah. So probably just do that and
Mm-hmm.
then boom,
Beautiful.
boom.
I love it. Great. So now what does this enable us to do inside of stock container?
It lets us use the setter function.
Correct. Correct.
Or uh it lets us do props dot set portfolio.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it allows us to do. However, the challenge is that we don't need it in stock container. We need it in stock. So we'll fix that in a
Yeah.
second. But if you go to stock container, let's
Uh-huh.
destructure it here. I know you don't like, you said you didn't like doing it here in this upper section.
Oh.
But since that's kind of how you had it before, let's just go with that. This is going to be inside the curly brackets, inside the other curly brackets. Um,
Oh, okay, yeah,
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 there you
yeah.
go. And
And
then
then it would
whatever
be props, right? Or would it be set?
set, since you're destructuring
Yeah.
it, it would be the actual name, which is set portfolio stocks.
Set. I'm just gonna
Beautiful.
just so I
Or
won't
oh, that's
misspell
the
or
wrong one. That's the
anything.
wrong one. Careful,
Oh, it
careful with
is.
that one. Yeah,
Is this one?
that one. Right. So now you have this as a prop inside of stock container. But the challenge is we don't need it in stock container. We need it where?
We need it in stock.
So how do we do that?
Okay, so now since we're dealing with a parent and a child instead of a grandparent and a child,
Mm-hmm.
now we can go ahead. Yeah, then we can do props dot set portfolio stocks, right?
Yes, we can, which we're doing here.
Yeah.
But before we can do that, we need to what? We need to pass it into stock from the parent. We're not
Oh,
where do we do that?
let me
So
see.
it's a bit tricky with the way they have coded it, but should be able to find it, I think.
It wouldn't be here, wouldn't it?
Close, really close. Where are they rendering each stock? Or where are they generating what's going to be rendered in each stock?
Where are they generate? Oh, do you mean this line here?
Yes, exactly. So we have
Okay.
to pass it into the component stock as a prop, just like all the other three props.
Yeah. Okay. So,
So you can actually do the
hmm,
exact same thing you just did.
the props. No. Ah, I'm having a brain
It's all good.
fart.
It's hard. This is the challenge. This is the hard part. How did you get it from main container into stock container?
Yeah. Main container to stock container. I went to the component
Mm-hmm.
and I added it there. That's why I went over here to look at it the way it
Yes,
looked.
exactly. So we have the same problem now. How do we get it from stock container to stock?
I would copy this,
Yeah, good.
go here, and then
Before
where
you
is
even
it?
come in
Oh
here,
no,
before you even come in here, yes,
here.
it's staying in here. Yeah, good. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. Good.
And then right here. Oh yeah,
Beautiful.
and then boom,
Yeah,
and then
you
like
add it
that.
as a prop. Yeah. So now it's being passed from main container to stock container. And then again, it's being passed from stock container to stock. Even though stock container is not using it, really, technically, we're not using it in the JSX for stock container. The sole purpose is just to pass it to stock.
Yeah.
So this is something called prop drilling, which is really
Oh.
annoying and usually not good to do and makes people cry as you are feeling right now. But you see how that kind of chain works, right? The grandparent is passing it to the parent, and the parent is passing it to the child.
Yeah, but they would be they would be passed obviously in different ways because we passed it here like that,
Yep.
and then
And then
from
it's
here we put it in the destructuring, or no, not the destructuring. Oh,
it's actually the
oh,
same. It's being passed the same way. It's just in this case you're destructuring it, and in the other one you're not. You
okay.
could destructure it in stock if you wanted to, but the way that you pass it's the exact same. You have to pass it here at the component into the component, and then you have to remember to actually grab it inside of props inside of the child. So you can do props dot set portfolio stocks. So you have to change it in two places. So in this case, you change it on line. So let's do this. If you go back to main container, you added it here, line 23, right? Set portfolio stocks equals set portfolio stocks. You added that. Then that allowed you to add that in line 5 here.
Mhm.
Now you can use it
Okay.
here. Yeah. But then you wanted to do the same thing, but for stock. So you added it on line 6, set portfolio stocks equals set portfolio stocks for the stock component.
Oh,
And then if you go to the stock component on line 3, now it's in props. So you can do props dot set portfolio stocks, which is what you're doing on line 9.
yeah. Okay, yes, yes. Okay. So however we change or wherever we decide to utilize or create, in this case we're mapping over the component,
Correct.
wherever we're editing, sort of utilizing the component, that's when we need to pass down the
Yes.
um the prop, right?
Yeah, if you need to change the state that's in a parent, then you have to pass it down to the child.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect
And
sense.
if the child is really far down, it's like a grandchild or a grandchild, it gets more and more annoying to do that, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's see what happens. So if you look at stock.js now this all this code should work, right? So we can do props at set portfolio stock. So when you click on a stock card, we are doing set portfolio stocks, which is changing the state inside of main container, the
Yep.
grandparent, right? That's where it's changing the state in portfolio stocks, which should then re-render the portfolio container that's using that portfolio stock. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of twisty action going on
Yeah.
here, but
Uh,
it is kind of wild if you think about it. It kind of makes sense, right? So we want to change it here and then have it be updated in the UI somewhere else.
mhm.
And we shouldn't care. We shouldn't have to find out where it gets updated. That's the job of React. React is going to keep track of where it gets updated, and wherever it's being used, if it's being used in one component somewhere else or two components somewhere else, doesn't really matter. React is going to re-render those components so that we actually see the updated UI.
Yep.
That's the whole purpose of React. So let's take a look what happens. Our goal is that if we click on one of those cards, our JSON string, in theory, should update to have that new card in it if we did everything correctly.
Oh,
There you go. But do you see the issue?
yeah. It's replacing it instead of adding
Yes.
on to it.
But pretty cool, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
So
Nice.
I guess the real question here is we didn't really solve it. I'll probably actually let you solve the rest of this as for yourself because I think that would be a good exercise. But does that make sense to you?
Yeah, yeah. Yep. Yes.
It was a windy road to get here, and I asked you a lot of hard questions. But is there anything that you were confused on?
Um, no, I don't think so. I mean, obviously, I would think it's reasonable to say that, like, the very very last part of like how you would, would you call, I think you called it like prop
Prop
drilling, I
drilling,
think it was.
correct?
Yeah, that's definitely hazy, but like the concept makes sense. I can definitely visualize that a lot more. Yeah, like I said, the biggest problem that I have with it is, like, and I'm sure you can you could notice that, like, whenever it was like, all right, so we're in main container, and in main container we obviously have stock container, but in stock container then we have the stock, and then and it just becomes so hard and it becomes so overwhelming.
The best tip I would give you, and when I work on my React series shortly, I'll actually be doing this. The number one tip I could probably give you when you're starting this stuff out is don't try to visualize this just in your brain. It's gonna fail, right? You're gonna brain melt yourself into oblivion because it's almost impossible as someone jumping into this to actually map out that tree in your brain. Because when I'm looking at this, since I've used React enough and helped other devs on my team and stuff like that with this stuff before, I'm actually mapping out the actual tree
Yeah.
with all the states in each part of that tree in my brain as I'm talking to you, right? Obviously, you don't see that.
Yeah.
So that's why where those questions were coming from when I was asking them. So my advice to you and everyone doing this for the first few times is literally have a pen and paper in front of you or some drawing tool, right, an iPad or whatever, and literally draw out circles. The way I would draw this is first circle at the top of the page, app.js, right? And to the like beside the circle, I would put the states. Empty array for portfolio, empty array for the stocks or whatever it was, whatever the names are, right? Beside that bubble, so that you know that that's where the state is for that component in the tree. Then you can draw branches to the subcomponents. So let's do this really quick for app. So if you go into app.js, it has two children. So I would draw two sticks down to children. One would be header and one would be main container. Let's look at header. Does header have any state in it? No. So it would just be, that'll be the end of that branch of the tree. Let's go look at main container. Main container has two states. So I'd write portfolio stocks, empty array, stocks, empty array, right? Then I would draw three branches from that node, actually. There's search bar, there's stock container, and then there's portfolio container, right? And then I would repeat that until I get to the end of the branch, just like we did for header. And once you draw out, like literally draw out that tree with all the states listed beside each of the nodes, what you'll be able to see is like, oh, I need to change stocks, but I need to change it from here. How do I do that? Well, I need to get this down here, right? How do I do that? Well, probably prop drilling, probably some other method that's more advanced, right? But then I can set it here and then I can change it here. And then that should change this other one over here, right? That all sounds kind of crazy when I'm saying it like that, right? Which is why it's so complicated. But as you draw, if you can imagine, right, if you draw out that tree and you see where the state is and where it needs to be to change things, it's much easier to visualize and then actually code out after the fact. Does that help?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it does, because yeah, you're basically, yeah, my mistake was, you can't really, that's why we have, computers, right? So they can do these kinds of thinking, like, for us, you know what I mean? So
Correct.
whenever we try to dive into doing that kind of, twisty turny, only things that computers can do, then obviously, like, we're gonna fumble a lot. So, we should find better ways to actually visualize and help us, what I mean, kind of
Yeah.
see it.
And a
Yeah.
lot of really big organizations actually literally have a document that when you get onboarded onto a project, like a React project like this, they literally have that tree drawn out for you,
Mm.
right? So someone who gets onboarded can look at that component tree, right, or gets generated by some tool that literally maps out the entire component tree with all the states so that you know kind of the gist of the app without having to dig through like 50 different files with all these imports all over the place, right? It's much easier to do that in like a two-dimensional setting that's all mapped out in front of you than it is by digging through a bunch of these random files with imports all over the place. Especially if components are used in multiple places and their state is being drilled all over the place. So there are solutions to this prop drilling problem because it's really annoying, as you can see, and kind of inefficient feeling. It gets a bit more advanced, but for now, I would just stick to kind of that as a solution. The one thing to mention is we use the props instead of the import export. So you can't actually export portfolio stocks or set portfolio stocks,
Hmm.
right? Because it's inside of main container, which is a function. You can only export things that are on the top level, right? So main container in this case is the only thing you can actually export in this file, which is why it's being exported on line 33. So if you had another variable declared in the outer scope, then you could export that as well if you wanted to. But the whole point of React is everything is inside of these functions in the closure of these functions. So you can't actually export them. You can only export the outer function itself. So if you need access to those functions, like in this case, the set states or the states themselves, the only way to do that in the children component is to prop drill them down. Or there's other, as I said, methods that are similar kind of idea.
Do you by chance have a like some kind of rule of thumb to, because like I said in the examples that I saw, a lot of the times, like literally like 9 out of 10 times, I would see use state the default being an empty string.
Yeah,
What would be when it would be like a yeah, what would be the cases where it would be an array and
good question.
empty?
So you should set it to whatever makes sense as a default value for that particular state. So if, for example, that's like let's say it's a form and then there's a name field, like first name, for example, right? That doesn't make sense to be an array or an
Yeah.
object. That probably should be a string, right? If it's a price, right? Maybe it makes sense to be a number. Maybe it doesn't make sense to put it as zero by default because maybe you don't want it to be zero because maybe that means something. So maybe it'll be null, right? So you have to kind of be like, well, what should the default be for this particular state, for this particular part of the UI that I'm trying to render, so that when the user first loads it, the default kind of makes sense or is what I expect it to be. And then it can be changed later. And then the changed version should be the same type as the default version. So, for example, you should never start it as a string and then change it to an array later. That would be kind of weird. So you want it to be the same type consistently across because you're usually going to be using the functions that are needed regardless of whether it's the default or not the default. For example, if you try to use map or filter on a number, if you change the state to be a number, then it would crash the program.
Yeah, 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 that makes sense. Kind of a dumb question when you think
No,
about it. I'm not gonna lie, I should
I
know.
mean, I mean that just means that you're getting more knowledge if you feel that, right?
Yeah.
Because now you know, right? So that's good. Um, as you can see, quite challenging, right? There's a lot going on, and this application, I'm assuming, will get more complicated, and you will eventually have to send stuff back to the server and change information there, maybe save some data, all that kind of stuff. But this is definitely a good first step. So hopefully that makes sense. I think the to sum it all up, I think the kind of key takeaways from what we just did together here tonight is like just generally how the component architecture works, how it's all a tree, how there's these states, and how those states can be passed around as props, whether it's the actual state itself or the function to change the state. Anything can be passed down as a prop, and it works just as you would intend it to work, right? And the whole point of React, literally the entire point of React, for the most part, is to keep your UI, which is what you see, the DOM elements that you see rendered on the screen, in sync with your state. That's what React is, right? It sounds simple, but it's really not. Because as you can see, you can change the state from a grandchild component. And then that should magically re-render one of the other parents somewhere else in this UI. Right? And you can imagine there's maybe 2 or 3 other components that use that state. They should all re-render properly. So what React is doing for us is all that heavy lifting behind the scenes as efficiently as possible so that when we change these states, it actually triggers those re-renders for anything that's using that state. Which makes sense if you really think about it. um, cool. Yeah. Another good exercise, and this might be a bit complicated, is to think of like if you didn't have React, right? Like if you just were to do this without React, how would you do it? Like how would you change the state and have the UI re-render? Right? Like what would be required in order to do kind of what React is doing for us here? It's actually not as complicated as you think it is, but it's kind of annoying. And there's like a lot of repetition that's really kind of annoying to do, which is why this is a nice kind of wrapper around stuff. So you'd have to recreate those elements, or you'd have to change the inner HTML of those elements every time the on-click happens, and you'd have to kind of do it in all the right places, yada yada yada, and it get kind of tedious. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. I didn't throw too much at you.
No, yeah, that was great. Definitely definitely gonna write a lot of stuff down after this. I should have been doing it at the side, but I didn't want to the clicking and stuff like that.
It's okay. All
But
good. Yeah,
yeah,
just
this is
message
great.
me if you forgot any of that stuff. But I think hopefully that was helpful. You still have a little bit of work to do to actually get it, so it's not just the one component in that thing. So that'll be kind of fun. But I think you have most of it done. And the main thing for me is I really don't want to be giving you the answers.
Yeah.
I want you to reach the answers by yourself. And I hope that all the questions that we were talking about and kind of the way that we got to where we are now, I hope you're a bit more clear on that. And like if you were to kind of recreate that, maybe you wouldn't do it perfectly the next time, but like over time, you feel like, okay, I can remember this. Oh yeah, it was this thing, it was that thing. And eventually it becomes muscle memory.
Yep.
Cool, man. All right, that was a good one. Thanks for having that recorded as well. I guess if anything comes up, just let me know. And I hope all of you enjoyed that on the channel. And feel free to roast Martin in the comments if you like, or ask any other questions that come up. So until our next video together, everyone, see you later.